Welcome to the Nectar podcast, discussing the things we think about Hull City AFC.
Welcome to the Nectar podcast. You could be watching us live on Periscope, you could be watching us as live, as it were, on our YouTube page, or you could just be enjoying the audio experience via the podcast on our SoundCloud page and via iTunes as well. Whichever way you're joining us, it's good to have you along. A lot to talk about, and thankfully, mercifully, gratifyingly even, pretty much all about what's going on the pitch. And an eventful old week we've had with there being two games. We're going to, unusually for Amber Nectar podcasting, we are going to talk at length about something really, really good and skate over something that was less good, shall we say. The less good being the game at the weekend against Manchester City. But a 3-1 defeat to a side like that, Andy, is hardly a disgrace. City weren't disgraced, even though they were comprehensively outplayed. Nobody got injured, and we can just forget about it now and move on to somewhat more pressing occasions ahead.
I suppose it's not the sort of game that determines your ultimate divisional status, is it? You want to secure points in other games, and that's why you more plausibly target them. I suppose it's a relief that City went well and truly beaten, and that we remain in approximate contact with Swansea on goal difference, for example. When we went 2-0 down on about the 48th minute, then you start to think this could get a little bit unpleasant, and we could say goodbye to any hopes we've ever got of having a less poor goal difference than anyone in the division this season. But we sort of stabilised, we kept it to a respectable kind of margin. I find it almost hard to pass much comment on it, really, than we lost deservedly to a far stronger team. And I suppose, like you said, no one got hurt, no one got sent off, it wasn't a disaster. What else do you really comment on a match that went precisely the way everyone thought it would?
No, indeed, but having said that, the one thing, and you have touched upon it there, that was gratifying from the Manchester City game, Les, was that having gone 2-0 down, City didn't collapse. Maybe there's a Marco Silva influence here, but that might have turned into a collapse under one or two previous managers of our acquaintance.
Maybe. I got the feeling Manchester City didn't feel as if they needed to do a great deal more. You can be mildly frustrated at the attitude, and Marco Silva's touched on this himself, that we seem to have an odd way of mentally preparing for away games. But given the opposition, you can't get too frustrated about it. That would have been different had Swansea's result been different. That would have been significant. But as it was with us losing and Swansea losing, it was sort of a little bit as you were. Although it did put us in the unfortunate situation of wanting Arsenal to win tonight, and I try to avoid wanting success for Arsenal at all costs, but it's a necessary evil tonight. So it feels in some ways, it just felt like a round of games has gone. I do feel it was a little bit too routine for Manchester City. I think 3-0 was about right. The one goal we scored was a little bit bizarre, really, wasn't it? I mean, Ranocchi didn't get a decent connection on it. I think it just served to highlight what a poor goalkeeper Willy Caballero is, and how he's chosen over, say, Joe Hart because he can play the ball with his feet. Joe Hart packed off to Torino in Italy. Is a little bit bizarre, but we're not here to talk about Manchester City's team selection, so we'll move on.
I think it was Bravo playing, wasn't it? Though.
Oh well.
Well, no, I didn't know whether you were genuinely I didn't know whether you were genuinely making a mistake there to try and make a point. I don't know, but it was Claudio Bravo, the guy who was replaced Hart because apparently he's better with his feet.
Manchester City's succession of crap goalkeepers.
The thing is, I mean, there's a stat, including Ranocchi's goal. Bravo has conceded goals from all 7 of the last 7.
I don't think they all look like Bravo.
The last 7 shots on target against Claudio Bravo in the Premier League have gone in, including Ranocchi's. His was the 7th. So if City had had a few more pot shots, then maybe there might have been more of an opportunity.
This is almost a lesson to be learned from by their next opponents, I think. I thought one interesting point you make, Les, is that Swansea were losing, and it's almost it is another round of games survived. Weirdly, it's like another round of games actually prospered, because I think we'd have taken equal results between City and Swansea this weekend, given the comparative difficulties of the games. And weirdly enough, City's odds of staying up improved for a defeat on Saturday, which is probably not too common an event. But we've got through another round of games. We've got our hardest game of the season out of the way, and no one's really cashed in. And I think we've had good luck with other results soon, and that's not going to last, but we might as well enjoy it while it happens.
And if you're going to get your best centre forward and your best defender briefly injured for a match, then get them injured for Manchester City, where their effect would have been not much more than negligible had they been playing.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. All in all, it was a good one to get out the way, wasn't it? There's eminently more winnable games, or games that you'd expect us to get a result from. I don't think we can afford to take that attitude again this season, but it probably was the last such opportunity to do so.
Just one last thing I would add is that I think that Manchester City have done us a favour despite beating us by taking the foot off the pedal. It's fairly obvious now that they know they're not going to win the league. They're out of the Champions League. They want to win the FA Cup, so I think they're saving themselves for their FA Cup semi-final against Arsenal and wanting to win a trophy that way, because it's the only trophy that's left for them to win. I think the Premier League for the remainder of the season for them is a bit of a procession, and that included against City. And I suppose even though they still, even at procession pace, they've still got enough to beat Hull City. At least it means they're not going to go flying into tackles or putting the ball constantly into our net. So again, we should be grateful for the way that Manchester City approached the game on Saturday in terms of our long-term or indeed medium-term future. 3 days before, completely different scenario at the Circle and Middlesbrough. Given that we went a goal down right at the start and then conceded another one right at the end of the first half, which shouldn't have gone in, we had our fair share of knockbacks in that game and yet still made it one of the most enjoyable performances, entertaining games and sort of thrilling all-round footballing spectacles that we've seen on our own premises for quite a while.
And there's the schizophrenic nature of City, where we don't really turn up away from home, but at the moment you don't see us getting beaten at home, and to a point where we're not even that perturbed when we go a goal down, because we've seen us do it a couple of times recently where we've gone a goal down and we've clawed it back and then we've won it. So there is sort of a sense of belief even in the stands. I mean, there was a little bit of nervousness when Middlesbrough wrongly had the second goal allowed.
Just before you go to that though, let's do it chronologically. Was there nervousness when Middlesbrough scored straight away at the start of the game?
I think because it came so early, it didn't seem so much. It felt like a setback rather than, you know, a true
something
barrier
that would cause long-term damage.
Yeah, exactly. It was so early in the game. It felt it wasn't a killer blow. It was something that we could come back from.
I think it helped that we'd already put the ball into their net. Well, rightly disallowed, but we already knew that we could cut that lot open. And
what a bizarre decision by Markovic to pass in that instance. I was pleased for him that he managed to score a little bit later on, even though it was a bizarre attempt at a shot that he scored from it. It was a weird lashing of the ball. But I wondered why he didn't have the confidence to shoot himself instead of squaring the ball. Well, not even squaring, because you can't square a ball if the player's in front of you. It was a really bizarre decision when it did seem easier to sort of maybe feint for the pass. We've seen him calmly strike a ball previous. That one at Manchester United where he just languidly thrashed the ball against the post. But in that instance, his arse dropped out and he felt the need to pass it. It was a really bizarre choice. And so I was quite pleased for him that he had a chance to salvage that not long after.
When you want a player not to be unselfish.
Sometimes you just got to back yourself. It could be a confidence issue. You're more likely to pass the responsibility on if you're not feeling confident.
I think it's possible that as Markovic received the ball, was it Nias that he passed to for the disallowed goal, that Nias was slightly behind him, but of course Nias is quick, and by the time Markovic decided to pass it, he was no longer behind him. Of course, you can't be offside if you're behind the ball. That was the...
Or even level.
It's a split-second decision, whatever you do.
If it had been a lateral pass, it would have, it wouldn't have reached Nias. But it definitely was a forward pass. It was a bit of a brain-dead decision, but it didn't thankfully cost us long. And there's the confidence. We go a goal down. We make a boneheaded decision like that a couple of minutes earlier, and City aren't phased while they're at home. There's just this. We can grind this out. We can do it, which is great, and that clearly must come from the manager. I don't think that kind of mental toughening up that Silva's achieved with the squad, you can instill that and then immediately download it and plug and play it for away games as well. That's something that's going to take long term. Whoever's our manager at the start of next season, that's going to be something that you address then. It's probably a little bit too late to instill a toughness away from home. It's a surprise, isn't it? Because you think we went to Old Trafford and we gave Manchester United a scare. So why do we go to other games and that there's a distinct possibility we're going to get beat or come away with nothing? Especially when you sort of juxtapose it with the swagger that we had against Middlesbrough, even in that brief period where we was a goal down. City didn't suddenly start panicking. They didn't start lumping the ball. They were playing beautiful, passing, fluid football, and it's interesting the sheer difference between the two. And as long as we can keep doing it at home, then perhaps it won't be an issue.
It had been a little while since we'd seen Abel Hernandez get onto the score sheet. I mean, aside from the overall vitality of the goal in terms of City's bigger picture, just on a personal level for him, he is still, after all, our alleged ace goal scorer. It was a huge goal for him.
He has been contributing to the team, I think, in recent weeks. Even before he scored against Middlesbrough, it was a clever little header for Nias, and he set up Nias in a previous home game, Swansea, and he was part of the move that saw the goal come against the equaliser against West Ham. So he's contributing to things. It's not as though he's just stood there waiting for everyone to pass and provide him with an open goal. He is doing stuff. But you're totally right, Matt. He's a striker, and strikers need goals, and he's no different. He probably felt a bit put out about getting dropped after scoring and playing well, because the need to change formation overrode his own inclusion, and that's a bit of a shame for the player himself. But it's good. You're going to need him to if he can score a couple between now and the end of the season, that's going to get us some of the points that we might need.
Mm. The goal that Middlesbrough scored right at the end of the first half. Now, watching it on a stream, I wasn't immediately aware of the players who were offside because of just the general camera angle. But as soon as you saw the first replay, not only it's easy to be wise after the event when you're watching it on telly, but as soon as you saw the first replay, you thought he's offside, and so is at least one other player. And then you think the angle that the officials are at suggests that they should have known that instantaneously. And it's not only about the linesman not spotting it, but the fact that Michael Oliver clearly thought something might have been amiss and went over to the linesman, and it was almost, I thought, as if Michael Oliver was giving the linesman the chance to say, I've cocked this up. Can we change the decision, please, and not give the goal? And he didn't. So presumably the linesman was 100% sure that two Middlesbrough players were onside when. You would think that, I know you two guys are qualified officials, but I'm pretty certain you were calling this linesman in the stands at the time. At that level, you don't miss things like that, surely.
I don't think you can put it on one of them. I think between them they should have come up with the right decision. I mean, the linesman will have seen that there was three players nearer to the goal line than there were, any outfield City players. A linesman might have struggled, with the sort of depth perception to see where the nearest man to Jakupovic was, whether he was in his eye line or not. But he certainly should have seen that he was offside. And then Oliver should have seen the placement of the nearest Middlesbrough player. And I don't see how you can't say a Middlesbrough player effectively be right in Jakupovic's eye line or right next to him isn't an active participant in play. Even if you go beyond the traditional offside where you've just got people, beyond our last outfield player when the ball's played. Even if you say, okay, well maybe the ball didn't come off them and the player who headed the ball wasn't offside. I just don't see how you could see that the last Middlesbrough player wasn't interfering with Jakupovic's ability to make a save. And Jakupovic didn't even respond, as if he truly believed that was going to get called offside, so he didn't even need to bother making the effort. And so it was a bit of a stunner when that was allowed after the little conflagration of officials.
And given that City had been dominant And given that half-time was so close, it's almost like a triple kick in the teeth, isn't it? You've conceded a goal, you've conceded the momentum, and you've been wronged by the people who are supposed to make sure that the laws of the game are upheld. It can't have been despite being ahead and despite some great football from City, it can't have been a happy concourse at half-time.
Well, you try and tell yourself that you would have been delighted with 3-2 at half-time before the match started, and that held true. But to concede a goal, any kind of goal, just or unjust, right on half-time, it rather summons up the spectre of typical City, doesn't it?
Do you think there was a feeling that the next goal would be scored by the team that would eventually go on to win the match? If Middlesbrough equalised early in the second half, or any point in the second half, do you think that it was likely they could have gone on to win the game? Is that what you were thinking at half-time?
I think you've correctly identified that goals are really important in
no, but if Middlesbrough, if Middlesbrough had scored, it would still only have been 3-3. What I'm saying...
Forgive my facetiousness.
No, you weren't being facetious, just wrong. If Middlesbrough had scored the next goal in the second half, it would only have been 3-3. What I'm saying is, would that have given them the impetus and also knock City back enough for Middlesbrough then to be able to go on and win the match?
They'd already been in the lead and messed that up, so there's no reason to suppose that a goal to make it 3-3 would have been fatal.
Yeah, I didn't get the feeling at any point that City were losing control of the mental arm wrestle of the game. I suppose the biggest worry is if players start thinking, oh, this is a massive injustice, and frothing them out of that, the mind goes off the game and they're fulminating on the injustice of it all, rather than thinking, well, let's just go score another goal and put it beyond doubt. I slightly suspect Marco Silva wouldn't tolerate such a thing, and I suppose it's handy that he had the break to discuss that on, because 15 minutes after that incident, you didn't get the feeling that City was still ruminating on it. They just went on and carried on the job as before.
And Borough didn't look massively capable of getting back in the game for as long as it was 3-2, even though there are obviously going to be nerves on the home side in that sort of situation, especially when you think about the context of the game.
Well, we controlled it quite nicely at 3-2 in the second half, and yeah, half-time came perhaps in some ways in a good time. There's always that belief that it's a bad thing to concede right on half-time, but maybe if you're going to concede one like that, it's a good idea to all sit down and for the manager to remind his players that they should focus on the things that they can control rather than a ref messing up, which can happen, and it's nothing to do with the players. Just one interesting thing on the decision. From the East End, I did at first think that the ball had come back off a City player, so I don't think that either of the officials were in any doubt that someone was offside. I do honestly think think it came off a City player, and it's easy to be charitable to the officials now that we've won the game.
Well, you two know the laws. If it had been a Middlesbrough head and the header towards their scorer had deflected off a City player, so it wasn't an active touch by a City player, it would have been offside then. But if it had been an actual active back header, for example, sort of by a City player, then he would have been onside. I mean, I know that much, but it's the question mark as to whether it was a deflection off a City player that would have then rendered him onside.
It wouldn't have rendered him onside. They just must have thought it come off a back or a shoulder or a poor header. It did look a little bit like that from E5, I have to be honest. But then what surprised me is when they took the time to get speaking to each other, they must know something is not quite right about this.
And that's why I think the onus was on Oliver, who I think was better placed than the linesman. As a linesman, you see a very shallow view, and you've got that bizarre dichotomy of trying to have your eyesight in two places at once, which is going to send you a bit boz-eyed, because you've got to be mindful of seeing the ball going forward and the position of the player who receives it. It's almost, humanly impossible. It goes on interpretation of what you think's happened. I just think Oliver was better placed to have seen them.
Do you think referees are trying to protect their linesmen slightly in situations like this, where they think it's possible they might have made something of an error, but they don't want to expose the linesman to the error, even if, as most of us would say, in any situation like that, as long as the correct decision is ultimately made, it shouldn't matter. And therefore it's possible that by giving the goal, Michael Oliver was protecting a member of his team from being punished by his authorities. You'd rather be given brickbats by supporters who have no say and no influence than brickbats from your authorities who maybe then stop you from officiating a game the following weekend. I mean, you look at that guy who gave that ridiculous penalty, didn't give a ridiculous penalty, but disallowed that ridiculous penalty for Newcastle against Burton, got the laws on encroachment completely wrong, not given a game at the weekend, completely withdrawn from the game. I mean, that happens to officials when they make a boo-boo, unless, in a linesman's case, they've got a referee to back up saying we were perfectly within our rights to assume that the decision we were making at the time was the correct one.
Is this a bit like Star Trek 6 where
Never watched it.
Kirk was found guilty because 2 crew members assassinated the Chancellor of the Klingon?
Exactly like that.
Is it like
Perhaps
that?
you'd like to elaborate.
I'm not really sure that a referee can extend his authoritative cover and get a linesman off the hook. I think when people are there to observe officials, it's purely to see that they've got the decisions correctly. I think it's a dispassionate, objective look, and whichever way you slice it, they would have looked at that and said there's been an error.
Somebody on Periscope's just said a video ref would have sorted it out, but I don't want video refs for offsides.
I don't believe video refs would sort it, because the person who's viewing the video is still human. As somebody who watches the NFL, I've seen video refs. I've seen things go to replay and still it's come out with a wrong decision. And there's certain things as well, it comes down to intent, or stuff like whether a player's dived or not, whether a player's handballed it or not, or it comes from interpretation, or as well whether you've got an angle enough that proves it conclusively, because sometimes you can watch something from 6 or 7 angles and it can look different from different angles. So the idea that you show a replay and you will always get the correct decision, I'm sorry, but other sports have shown that to be false.
And I think football itself shows it to be false. For example, how long did we argue about Arsenal's first goal against us a few months ago? And there are still, no doubt, multiple takes on that. I do think that a video referee would have sorted that particular decision out, the Middlesbrough second goal, but there'll be other things that they just can't say with any certainty. I mean, look at egg chasing. You sometimes got video officials looking at it for ages.
And they don't know.
And it's only ever really a best guess. So
also, somebody in one of the newspaper columns made a good point this morning that people were talking about the Stoke-Liverpool game at the weekend, where Liverpool had what looked like a clear penalty denied. Play went on. Stoke scored at the other end. Now, because play went on and Stoke scored at the other end, the video ref wouldn't have been able to look at the penalty decision or non-decision until the ball had gone dead. The ball went dead when the ball went in Liverpool's net. Imagine being the video ref who then says, right, you've got to go all the way back and give Liverpool the penalty. Imagine then being the referee who not only has got to disallow Stoke City's goal, but then basically give a penalty at the other end and have to deal with what comes from the Stoke City fans as a consequence. As far as I'm concerned, video refs or technology beyond what the man in the middle can do should only apply to what it should only be applied to what it's being applied to now, which is whether the ball has crossed the line or not. I don't think we need video refs for anything else. I think human error should apply to officials just as much as it does players, even if on occasions, like on Wednesday night, we're the ones who are affected by it.
Well, I just think I've seen sports where human error also covers the people that are the video refs as well. And
would we have been that arsed if we'd been 6-0 up at the time? That's the thing. I mean, is it about when it happens in the context of the game as opposed to the specifics of the incident in question?
A wrong decision's a wrong decision, and you're trying to eliminate that as much as you can. I'm just not convinced video refs are the way to do it. It feels like a nuclear weapon to get rid of an irritating mosquito. Refereeing official mistakes are very frustrating.
Don't suggest that to Donald Trump, will you?
And sometimes they do affect the outcome of a game, but I don't know. I don't watch rugby league often, but in a couple of occasions where I've been in a pub and it's on, I just seem to have noticed that the referees are just... they're afraid of making their own decisions, so the most utterly basic things they're doing this stupid square thing, and the referees are even look like Borg now. They've got cameras on their necks and endoskeletons. It's absolutely bizarre, and still their authority has been absolutely cut down because they just. They refer to the television because they think, well, there might just be a minor thing that happened 15 tackles ago, and I don't want the television, the Sky Sports pundits to prove me that I'm wrong. I think TV exerts too much influence over the game already. I really don't want to be handing it over to television more.
TV has stopped wanting to cover games and now wants to determine games, and I think that's that's a worry. It really is. I like you said, Matt. I like where we're at now, whereby the ball going in the goal is determined as a fact instantly by technology. I'm unconvinced by the need for any further encroachment.
Let's talk about Harry Maguire because his first Premier League goal for us has been a long time coming, just as it was for Robertson against West Ham the previous Saturday. Although Robertson had scored in other competitions, of course, but I don't think have we ever seen Maguire score? Has he scored in a cup competition? I'm trying to remember. Anyway, the point is, he shoved in that beautifully placed, narrow-angled header to make it 4-2 against Middlesbrough and won us the match, basically, and capped another outstanding personal performance, won the captain's armband with pride during the game, went off injured with a sort of a heroic reception. And then, of course, earlier, for one of City's first half goals, there was that wonderful pass, one of the best passes I've seen any Hull City player play, when you consider the type of player, alleged type of player, that Harry Maguire on the national perception is supposed to be. It was one of his best nights.
Yeah, I think they should rerun the Made in Hull thing in Queen Victoria Square, but just project his pass on all of the major buildings in the city centre from now till the end of time.
I remember Stuart Elliott hitting a pass of similar velocity and distance for Craig Fagan to score a breakaway goal when we first got promoted to the Championship under Peter Taylor, and that's kind of the past benchmark for a breakaway goal that I associate any future candidacies with, and Harry Maguire's beaten that. It was a great pass, brilliant pass.
I didn't watch the match of the day highlights, but a few people at work were raging that match of the day made it sound as if Middlesbrough were unlucky and Gibson had an off day and weren't really giving City credit. How can that happen when City dictated the entire game?
It looks weirdly as though they decided in advance of the game even starting what they were going to talk about, and it was Ben Gibson. And that therefore, when they decided they were going to do that and he had a shocker, it had to be, wasn't Gibson unlucky? Markovic is going, thought, no, he didn't clear the ball.
It bugs me, that kind of thing. Well, you've touched on it already, but it's the established narrative, and they can't move away from it. Why don't you just actually tell us the story as it unfolds, rather than deciding it ahead of the game?
At the risk of defending Match of the Day, which I don't wish to do, because I think you're absolutely right. I think they did far too much on Gibson. But of course, a midweek Match of the Day, they've got much less time to do full analysis between the match finishing and the programme starting. They haven't got the 5 or 6 hours that they've got on a Saturday. And it was Ian Wright, so you can't expect him to do great amounts of intellectual analysis from scratch. He's got to decide what he's going to talk about in advance, even if the opposite of what he's hoping for actually happens. Gibson is newsworthy because he was in the England squad, and that's where it comes from. But of course, first of all, it meant that they didn't discuss Maguire or indeed City's excellent performance, and secondly, they didn't touch at all on Middlesbrough's controversial second goal. City kind of were incidental, despite being deserving and conclusive winners of a relegation battle.
If you haven't got time to do proper analysis, then just don't do it. Show more football.
Fair point. Have City sent Middlesbrough down?
I think Middlesbrough have done a good job of that themselves, to be fair. They've been dreadful all season.
The body language and the quotes from Middlesbrough afterwards suggested that was the moment. And Steve Agnew, who of course used to be Steve Bruce's assistant for City, came into the game saying that he had inside knowledge of City, and then found himself being heftily well beaten. What he could have had knowledge of, given that the team has conclusively changed.
He has picked up something from Steve Bruce, though, because after Middlesbrough lost, he did vow that the dust war cells do. So, But, that's what he had inside knowledge of. He was
the first one to go, wasn't he? He went last Christmas, didn't he? The Christmas before last, I should say, to go back to Middlesbrough, because, of course, he had been there before. He was the first of Steve Bruce's backroom staff to go. I mean, not only has Bruce and Phelan and Clements and the rest of them gone, but half the first team squad that Steve Agnew remembers from City has gone. Different manager, different philosophy, different tactics, different fitness, and, of course, different players. He had no inside knowledge whatsoever, apart from possibly the quickest route to the bar after the game.
Yeah, it didn't really look like it got inside City's players' heads, did it? I think it's an abject failure all around.
like I'm sure many people watching and listening, I work with a Middlesbrough fan, and the conclusion that a lot of Middlesbrough fans seem to have drawn is that they've been playing a fairly cautious and conservative style of football for a few years now, and it's worked for them in the Championship. They improved year on year and eventually got themselves promoted, and fair play for that. However, when they needed to change it against City and go from trying not to lose to trying to win because they were almost at their last chance, they were hopeless, and you could tell it was a side accustomed more to grinding games out than trying to go forward and win games, because when they tried to do that, they were hopeless and they left gaps everywhere.
I think Sunderland and Middlesbrough have gone. I think we probably thought that before we beat Middlesbrough on Wednesday night, and it looks like it's going to be 1 from 3, doesn't it? I think, sadly, I mean, much as I would love to see West Ham United get drawn into the bottom 3, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think Bournemouth are going to get brought down into the mixer either, as it were. I think it's between 3 clubs now, us, Swansea and Palace. And when we look at the run-in, before we talk about this weekend's game, if we just look generally at the run-in, then I think if you were a Palace fan or a Swansea fan, after you'd cleansed yourself, you would really, really wish to have your next 4 games: Stoke away, Watford at home, Southampton away, and Sunderland at home, wouldn't you? Out of the 3 clubs, I mean, obviously we can't go as far as Palace because they're in the relegation battle with us, but the next 4 games, our next 4 games, are, on paper, of course, cliche, the best 4 games available.
Yeah, but you think like that, but then again, Palace are currently leading against Arsenal, and they went to Chelsea and they won. So, you know,
And also got beat by Southampton in midweek.
So in some cases, it's not just about the teams, the calibre of the teams you're playing. It's got to do with the mentality of how you set yourself up yourself. I just think it'd be fascinating how City play against Stoke. You know, we're going to think, right, let's get this game over with and you know, let's concentrate on home games. I think that's a dangerous business, because Watford can play pretty well at sometimes, and we're not by any means guaranteed to win that game, despite our incredible home form. So I would be bitterly disappointed if City went with a negative attitude to Stoke and didn't try and come back with something.
I know, obviously, this weekend is an away game, but generally we have our home form on our side. We also have a manager who can react to absolutely any situation, it would appear. I mean, Manchester City is a different kettle of fish because of the vast difference between the two teams put out on the park. So we've got a manager who is very much a flavour of not just the month, but of 2017 so far, in terms of how much he's achieved with City and how much admiration he's garnered as a result. You've also got Palace with a relegation specialist running them. Swansea will be scared, and I reckon Swansea players, manager and fans, not that they'd admit to it, have got more reason to be scared than we have and Palace have.
I'd rather be in our situation than Swansea's, and I'd rather have our run of games coming up, because we're not playing anybody completely unbeatable, except maybe Southampton in the next...
I wouldn't say Southampton away is completely unbeatable, especially as by the time we play them, 2 more games will have passed since then. We'll have already played Stoke and Watford. They'll have played 2 more games, and their season, like West Brom right now, might be all about the flip-flops. You know,
they're still a cut above us, though, aren't they? And if they turn up, I would expect them to beat us.
We've beaten them at home.
We have beaten them at home. I'm not entirely sure how, because we were completely outplayed for most of the game. But that was a different era, like you say. Marcus Silva's changed a lot of things. I can't really look past Stoke and what I want us to do at Stoke and what my aspirations for that one are, because that isn't mission impossible, even though it's a game that's been played somewhere other than Hull.
Do we think it's likely, possible, or maybe not likely that by the time we go to Palace, both teams could be safe, or just conversely that both teams could still need a win? It's the penultimate game of the season. An awful lot of football is still to be played between now and that second weekend in May.
Palace have got the best chance of getting out of it, hasn't they? I can't imagine that we'll either be up or down for definite by the time the Palace game rocks around, so we'll need something from it.
So a final away game of the season could be a game that decides plenty, if not everything.